Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Music Meltdown, the Album of the Year series. We're out of the 60s. Andrew is gone, and with us, Patrick is now joining. Oh boy, the 70s. This is, for many, the best decade in all of music. It's not quite there for me. I slightly prefer the aughts, but it's still outstanding. I mean, we're kicking it off with a pretty damn loaded year, too. 1970, tons of just great styles and like soul and jazz, just traditional rock and pop. All across the board, you're going to find some really cool stuff from a bunch of different artists. Patrick, how do you feel about 1970?
I love 1970. One of the strongest years in the decade. And I think you agree as well. It's just a fantastic year, loaded. I've got so many, it's impossible to just choose five and, because it could change any day. There's just so many. I know I've got well over 10 five-star albums for this year, easily, maybe close to 20. I just thought it's all over the board. Everything from jazz to funk to soul, R&B, rock, um, folk, even just all around. Just a super year. Just a great year.
Nice, nice. I don't have that many fives, but tons of 4.5s. Some of them that just missed my list are Stage Fright by the band, Sunflower by the Beach Boys, Let It Be by the Beatles, American Beauty by the Grateful Dead, Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel. Probably the one that was the closest, but didn't quite make it. And a record that I think deserves a bit more appreciation than it gets. I have 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus by Spirit, and then Signed, Sealed, Delivered by Stevie Wonder. And on to the top five now. Fifth place, a record that I tend to really enjoy. I think gets a little bit overshadowed in their catalog. I'm going with the debut record by Badfinger, being Magic Christian Music. Really just great Beatlesque power pop style melodies with really great lead vocals and whatnot. Really catchy songs that just get stuck in your head. Next up, my favorite record by Sir Elton John. I have Tumbleweed Connection. His sort of play on a Hollywood style band record. Really just excellent stuff, containing some of my favorite Elton John songs in general, notably Amarina. After then, go into my standards. Mott the Hoople with Mad Shadows, just such a cool blending of their sort of hard rock meets sort of Bob Dylan style folk. Just a really excellent record. McRouse, great playing. Ian Hunter, brilliant songwriter. And the top two, Let It Be didn't make my list, but two Beatles did. Paul McCartney is not one of them. My runner up is going to be Plastic Ono Band by John Lennon. I think just a really outstanding record. His most emotionally vulnerable, but still with great Phil Spector production and outstanding songwriting across the board. But my winner, pretty easily, maybe my favorite double, technically triple record of all time, All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. Just utterly impeccable songwriting front to back. This is obviously him unleash all of the songs that the Beatles wouldn't let him play, just shoved on the tape, showcasing that really underneath the pop appeal of Paul, underneath the sort of satirical wit of John, the core of the band was always George, just fantastic songwriter, brilliant guitarist, and really just the glue that held them together for so long, I'll say. That and weed. But yeah, just for as long as it is, just outstanding songwriting, brilliant production, and just nothing wrong with it. Wawa is going to be the song I'll specifically highlight for now, but there's still stuff like My Sweet Lord and song titles escape me, but there's 18 great ones, so ignore the Apple Jams. Winner in
There you go.
1970,
Yeah.
All Things Must
Yeah.
Pass by George Harrison.
Yeah. That extended jam is hard to sit through and give it attentive listening anyway. It's tough. But that triple, I mean, it is a triple album and it is pretty spectacular. Uh I mean, everything from My Sweet Lord through What Is Life, which is just a fantastic song. Just great song. So Beatles 1970, still sort of
Definitely
doing it
leading
for
the
you and for me too. Plastic Ono Band again, great album. Okay. So my five honorables would go to Vashti Bunyan, Just Another Diamond Day. A female, not a female analog, but a feminine analog to Nick Drake. Um, very folky. She lived it though. She was definitely a hippie. Lived out of a caravan for a while, and then had horses pull her around Scotland for a while. So she lived and sang it. It's a very good album. Miles Davis, Bitches Brew. Almost. I've got Miles will make my top five here, but Bitches Brew, I still got to give a shout out to. It's a fantastic album. Changed music in general, not just jazz, not just rock. It changed funk. Um, it changed R&B and soul. It was a monolith of an album for that year. I've got Funkadelic's debut album, Funkadelic, fantastic record, right out of the gate. Eddie Hazel, what a great guitarist. Antonio Carlos Jobim, Stoneflower. This is Jobim trying to break out of bossa nova, and very experimental, but yet it still has a very Brazilian feel to it. But it is certainly not strictly bossa nova, and it's a wonderful album. It's just a fantastic listen. And then the one that almost made it would be Jorge Ben's Força Bruta, which is also a Brazilian, fantastic part of the Tropicalia movement. Just it's such an amazing artist. But my top five would be start. I would start off with Led Zeppelin 3. I think Led Zeppelin 3 is probably my favorite Led Zepp album. Either that or Physical Graffiti. And Zepp will make further appearances down the line. But boy, I love the. I mean, it starts off with Immigrant Song, which is just a roaring, thumping, Norse Viking gods of a song. It just moves at an incredible pace, and then we go into country and folk influences, stay mainly acoustic throughout the rest of the album. Tangerine, great song. Ah, such a wonderful song. Great album, Led Zeppelin 3. It was a big change for them too. Black Sabbath's debut album is my number four. It is a killer album. Of course, another game changer for music, and in particular for hard rock and heavy metal, blues-based rock. It's an amazing album, and it started a long streak of fantastic albums from Black Sabbath. My number three would be Curtis Mayfield's Curtis, his debut solo album. It is spectacular. One side of it is Curtis released this album in 1970, and it was ahead of its time. It was basically it had a huge influence on both Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, and in particular Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On." This was a socially aware album, and social observations, in particular with class and racial divisions within the United States, something we still deal with today. Curtis was addressing it then, and just such a great. It's got such a funky groove. Curtis's guitar playing is spectacular. His songwriting is top notch. It's got a social awareness side, and then it's got a funky, groovy, positive second side to the album. It's sort of split into two, and I like that. It's great. My number two is going to be Neil Young's After the Gold Rush. Classic, just a classic Neil album, one of his best. And a continuation from his Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere was right before this album. And he's going to start on a long stretch here in the 70s of having some really great albums. It's got a bit of country, a bit of folk, and a bit of rock. Classic Neil. And it's some of his most iconic songs are on this album. So fantastic album. And then my number one album is going to be Alice Coltrane's Batad the El Daoud. To me, Alice Coltrane is just as appealing, and I enjoy Alice just as much as her late husband, John. and in a very different way. She headed down a much more spiritual path after John died. And this album features Pharoah Sanders and Joe Henderson on sax. And Pharoah Sanders is just amazing on this album. A beautiful sax player, and then jazz harp. And it is beautiful. It's wonderful. I think it's a very accessible jazz album to get into. There's some funk, there's grooves in it, but it's also a very transcendental and spiritually aware album. And Alice would later follow a almost a very devout spiritual path throughout the rest of this decade, and also come up with some amazing albums further on down the line. And she's going to show up in my list again as well. So this, I think, is I would not, if you, I don't know if you're a non-jazz fan that this would be an album to start off with. But if you do like spiritual jazz, and that seems to be gaining in popularity, go figure. But anyway, this is one of the best spiritual jazz albums ever recorded by far. So wonderful album, and that's my 1970.
Nice, nice. Cool to see the different representation of jazz and more sort of soul. For example, that Curtis record, actually, the first time I heard it, I wasn't crazy about it. It's risen up to say a 4 for me. Really cool
Yeah.
seeing the debut Sabbath record. Now, believe you mentioned Paranoid.
Well, oh, it was released in 72, wasn't it?
Uh,
Paranoid was?
I
Were they
believe
both
Paranoid was
released the
also.
same year?
I believe they were
Yeah.
both the same year. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it didn't make my honorables, but
it's
I'd
a loaded
probably
year.
be in the top 15. I think, Paranoid, I've certainly played that record to death. I mean, it's got War Pigs, it's got the title song. So,
Big time.
and it's fantastic. It's a fantastic album too. No, I didn't mention Paranoid. I think their debut album, there's something special about it. It is not quite as first of all, uh, Tony Iommi had not dropped tuned his guitar yet,
Mhm.
so it doesn't have that sludge effect of something like, say, Master of Reality.
Yeah,
But it's very blues based, and it's really hard rocking. And of course, the title track, Black Sabbath, is one killer track. I mean, and that's, if you're going to start off, it is a mind blower. I agree. If you're going to
big
start
time.
off an album, that's the way to do it.
Imagine
Um,
sitting around in 1970. The heaviest thing that you'd had before them was like Zeppelin 1. You just
right?
that
Which
hard.
was pretty heavy. But this is heavy, heavy. This is heavy
Heavy.
metal. This is really the start of heavy metal. Absolutely.
Well, that being said, I hope that you enjoyed all this. I'm going to keep a tally here for how many number ones of Patrick's I've heard. So far, I'm at a mean 0. Let's see how many of these I can get by the end of the year. With that being said, I hope that you all enjoyed this and you have a good time.